Let's start today's video with a question. Which country would you say is the US's biggest ally? Is it Canada? Maybe it's the UK? And well, what about Israel? Now, this is not an easy question to answer, and it definitely depends on who you ask. However, there is a country which has improved its alliance with the US a great deal over the last few years. It has improved enough that it is, for Republicans, the best friend of the country, its biggest ally, more so than any other country. And no, it's not Canada, no, it's not the UK or Israel, it is Australia, the country of surf kangaroos and the Sydney Opera House. Surprised? Well, you shouldn't be. Australia is, dear viewer, the only country in the world to have fought with the US in all of their big wars. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now also the operations against ISIS. For the Pentagon, we could almost say that Australia is to the USA what the score is to a movie. It at first might go unnoticed, but remove that music, and you can see that it's really something that's going to be missed. On January the 28th, 2017, and despite this old alliance, Donald Trump decided to hang up the phone on Malcolm Turnbull, Australia's Prime Minister. Not just that though, before he told him to get lost and hung up on him, Trump accused him of trying to export terrorists to the United States. And this was all just about a slight disagreement that these two countries had over 1,250 refugees. But that's a story that we're going to get into another day. Yes, this brief diplomatic tussle might not seem like that much in the grand scheme of things, but it has had a lot of consequences. Many Australians are left wondering if it isn't time to start cooling off the relationship with the United States by just a little. So, well, naturally, this is something we started wondering as well. It raises questions like, how important is Australia for the United States, and was it really sensible for Trump to hang up the phone on his greatest ally? And what kind of consequences is this going to have for him? Well, let's take a look, shall we?
Time for Asia.
It's probably not news to you, especially if you've been following this channel for a while. The world has changed, and both the political and economic power centers are moving quickly to Asia. By 2020, it is expected that more than half of the world's economy and population will be located in this continent. And China is emerging as a new superpower, and well, that's a fact. Up until now, a map of the world has looked pretty close to this one. Well, from now on, we're going to see things looking closer and closer to this one. As you can see, Europe is leaving the center of the world and is taking up a position in the corner. Alright, so that's just a fun comparison, but we can't really deny that the world is changing.
What the hell is that?
It's where you've been living this whole time.
The 21st century, it's going to be Asia's century, something we've discussed a bunch here at VisualPolitik. That is why former US President Barack Obama decided to bet strongly on Asia and make this continent his top priority for American diplomacy. It was under these circumstances that Australia became such a valuable friend. But how close is this friendship between the US and Australia? Well, let's have a closer look.
A big alliance.
In November of 2011, Barack Obama and Australia's Prime Minister at the time, Julia Gillard, signed a military agreement which meant a new era for military cooperation between these two countries. We could almost say that this new treaty started a military friendship between the US and Australia. In fact, let's take a look at the description the New York Times wrote about this agreement.
The agreement with Australia amounts to the first long-term expansion of the American military's presence in the Pacific since the end of the Vietnam War.
But, well, what did this agreement, what did it really mean? Well, for starters, thanks to the treaty, the US can deploy a fighting force of up to 2,500 soldiers in Australia. These troops are from the Marine Corps and they are able to quickly deploy in the event of any conflict. But don't think that this is the end of things. Since the collaboration between these two countries has grown and grown, it has grown enough to become an essential relationship for Washington. It's not just the Marines. The United States wants to make Australia the key home base for their activities in both the Pacific and Indian Oceans. So now you're probably getting the idea. The US wants to have access to landing strips situated in the north of the country. From here, they want to be able to deploy B-2 and B-52 bombers. They also want to set up a large naval base near Perth for their enormous fleet of nuclear aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines. And there's more. The United States is also trying to locate air monitoring centers and missile launch warning facilities there too. They even want to rent part of the Cocoa Islands in the Indian Ocean, which are under Australian sovereignty. So you might now be thinking, what do you mean? Why would the United States want to rent some random remote islands in the Indian Ocean? Well, the answer is actually pretty clear. The US wants to locate their long-range surveillance aircrafts and armed drones on the Cocoa Islands. They also want to use this archipelago as another deployment center for their bombers in case of war. But wait, because there is still more. The United States wants to improve the integration between their army and the Australian military so that the two forces could work together whenever needed. Now, if you don't exactly understand what the results of this could be, well, do consider this. In the last few years, Australia has carried out a significant renovation of their military equipment. We're talking about purchase contracts worth billions and billions of dollars, and among these, there is quite a lot of American material. Take the controversial F-35 as an example. Australia has committed to buy 72 units, which is going to cost $19 billion. This is a serious amount of cash. And we're talking about a country with a little more than 24 million inhabitants here, so per person, it's really a lot of money. Alright, so now you've got to be wondering, why Australia? Right? Well, that's for several reasons. First, because both countries are culturally similar, and as we've said before, they've fought together many times. Second, it's because Australia's geographical position is almost perfect. It's situated between the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, and it is close enough to the hotspots in Asia that the US could carry out attacks and deploy troops there quickly. And last but not least, there's another important factor. Australia is an important energy, raw material, and food supplier to China. So the Pentagon believes that in the event of a conflict or tough tensions between the two countries, it would be convenient to have control over Australia. And so, well, what about the other side? What do the Australians want? They basically understand that the US can sort of be an insurance policy, a way to ensure their own security. However, there are some voices who disagree, and these voices, they seem to be growing louder. And further, Trump hasn't helped with his whole hanging up the phone thing.
The Chinese alternative.
Now, China is by far the largest trade partner for Australia. It is the first destination for Australia's exports. It's the country of origin for many of the immigrants coming to Australia, and besides, there are more and more Chinese people who visit the country every year or who have decided to study there. Anyway, the Chinese mean a lot of money for the Australians, and, well, that has its consequences.
A 2016 survey conducted by the public policy group Lowy Institute asked respondents to identify the country that was more important to Australia. 43% chose the United States and 43% China. In 2014, 48% had answered the United States, and only 37% had chosen China. New York Times.
And look, under 45-year-olds clearly have opted for China, and almost half of the country's population believe their country should keep some distance from Trump's America. Paul Keating, an important Australian ex-Prime Minister, for example, is one of the personalities who thinks it would be better to try to improve relations with China and let relations with the United States cool down a bit. And pay particular attention to how he explains his position.
This society of ours is a better society than the United States. It's more even, it's more fair. We've had a 50% increase in real incomes in the last 20 years. Median America has had zero. For now, Australia has made some kind gestures towards the Asian giant. As an example, and by the way, Washington didn't like this at all, the country decided to participate in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, an institution led by China whose aim is to increase China's influence in the country. The Australian government itself has made it clear that China is, above all, a source for opportunities for the country. Luckily for Trump, though, there are still many things that protect his relationship with Australia. The American culture and the fear of the Chinese dragon.
Australia and the US are politically, culturally, and economically similar countries. They are so similar, in fact, at an international level that it could be argued that Australia is nothing more than an extension of the American lifestyle in Asia. And the truth is that a lot of Australians are pretty proud to be considered that way.
Whatever happens, I will not dull my affection for the American people and the best of American culture. I was not raised in America, but I was raised in the American century. I am not yet ready to say goodbye. Lisa Pryor.
Furthermore, the United States is still the largest investor in Australia, an investment that exceeds $500 billion. Also, the fact that China is still a dictatorship is making Australia suspicious. Many simply don't trust Beijing's intentions. In fact, the government has stopped many Chinese investment operations that intended to buy land in Australia. So we can say that it kind of all indicates that the alliance with the US will continue. But the Australians, well, they're a very practical people, and they have made it clear that they don't want to be affected by a future hypothetical war of power between China and the United States. So, well, that's what we think here at VisualPolitik, and now we'd love to know what you think. Do you think the United States will, despite Trump, carry out the projects they had planned to do in Australia? Or do you think China will achieve more and more influence in the country? And, well, most importantly, how would you feel if Trump hung up the phone on your country's leader? So if you did enjoy this video, please do hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe below and stay tuned for new videos. We put them out twice a week. Also, check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.
What are your chances of getting out of here with that jacket on?
Better than average.